Hello, my name is Alejandro Gomez, and I am the Senior Financial Aid Outreach Specialist in Delta College's Financial Aid Department. Today, I will be presenting a guide to completing the FAFSA. So we'll do two things during this presentation. First, I'm going to show you how to create an FSA ID, which stands for Federal Student Aid ID. You will use this ID to log into the FAFSA every year and also to sign your FAFSA application. Next, we're going to go over the FAFSA application question by question so you know what to expect when completing your application. Now, the FAFSA does have to be completed every year, and it always opens on October 1st for the following academic year. So I'm going to go ahead and open up a web browser. And so to get to the FAFSA application, you want to go to www.studentaid.gov. And when you get to this screen here, you either want to log in if you already have an FSA ID and you've already started a FAFSA application or completed a FAFSA application. However, if this is your first time completing a FAFSA application and you don't have an FSA ID, you want to click on Create Account. And you'll go to this page here to create an FSA ID. It'll tell you what you can use your FSA ID for and the items that you need to create an account. So again, you can use this FSA ID to log into your FAFSA application every year and to sign your FAFSA. So you want to make sure that you remember the username and password so that you have that information readily available every year. Now, your parent also has to create an FSA ID, and it only has to be one parent. They will need to use that FSA ID to sign your application electronically. You can see here that you as a student, you'll need a social security number to create an account. Your parent will also need a social security number if they want to create an FSA ID to sign your application electronically. If your parent does not have a social security number, they will not be able to create an FSA ID, and they will have to sign your FAFSA application by printing out a signature page, signing it physically, and mailing it to the FSA program. If your parent creates an FSA ID, the benefit to that is that they can use that FSA ID to sign your application every year. It also works for multiple students. So if you have other siblings who are going to go to college after you, they can use their FSA ID to sign their applications as well. And if your parent has already signed FAFSA applications for some of your siblings who are already in college or who have already graduated from college, your parent can use their FSA ID to sign your application as well. So to create an FSA ID, you would go to Get Started. And again, you need a social security number and either a phone number or an email address. And so you just want to go through these 7 steps to creating an FSA ID. And at the end of it, you should be able to use your FSA ID right away. There are some instances where they might need to verify some information, and you might not be able to use your FSA ID for a few days. But generally, usually, that FSA ID should be ready to use after you've created it. And so once you create that FSA ID, you want to go back to www.studentaid.gov. And now that you've created an FSA ID, you can click on Login. And I'll go back to the presentation. And so once you click Login, you're going to see the login screen. So you want to enter your FSA ID credentials and click on Login. And it'll take you to the FAFSA application. But before we get to the application, I just want to give you a brief overview of what you can expect when you get to the application. So after you log in, it's going to ask you for some information about yourself. It's going to ask you to select the high school that you're graduating from or that you've graduated from. It's also going to ask you for the colleges that you're thinking about attending the following academic year. It's also going to ask some questions about yourself to determine whether you need to provide information about your parents. It's also going to ask you for information about your parents if you are required to enter information about your parents. It's also going to ask you for financial information about your parents if you have to provide information about your parents and yourself. And then you're going to sign and submit your FAFSA. and then you'll receive a confirmation message at the end, letting you know that your application has been submitted. So when you get into the FAFSA application, you'll see that there's two applications. Right now, there's a 2021-2022 application and a 2022-2023 application. So if you're enrolled in school right now during the 2021-2022 school year and you're in college, you should complete that application. However, if you are planning on attending starting next fall for the 2022-2023 academic year, you want to go ahead and complete the 2022-2023 application. So now that you've made it to this page, if you need to complete this application, you're going to click on Start a New FAFSA Form. Now, let's say you already completed the 21-22 and you're just renewing your FAFSA for next year. You're going to click on Renew My FAFSA Form. So click on the one that applies to you. And after you click that, you're going to go to the first section of the application, which is going to ask for your student information. So it's going to ask you for some pretty basic information: your social security number, your first name, your middle initial, your last name, and your date of birth. After you've entered that information, you want to go ahead and hit continue. Then it's going to ask you for your student email and phone number. So you want to enter that information and hit continue. It's going to ask you for your student address. So after you've entered that information, you want to go ahead and hit continue. It's going to ask you about your state residency status. So it's going to ask you if you've ever lived in, this says New Hampshire, but your application should say California. It's going to ask you if you've lived in California for at least 5 years. So you want to answer that question accordingly. It's also going to ask you if you're a US citizen. So you want to click on that dropdown and select the response that best applies to you. And then you want to hit continue. Then it's going to ask you about your student education status. So it's going to, first question is going to be what will your high school completion status be when you begin college in the 2022-2023 school year? So if you're graduating this year, you want to go ahead and put high school diploma. If you graduated in the past and you got your high school diploma, you want to select that as well. If you did not receive a high school diploma, but you receive a GED, you want to click on the drop down and select the option that best describes your high school completion status. Next question is going to ask you what college degree or certificate will you be working on when you begin the 2022-2023 school year. If you're graduating from high school this year and you're going to be a freshman in college next year, you want to go ahead and enter your first bachelor's degree. If you are already in college, and let's say you just got your associate's degree and now you're working on your bachelor's degree, you also want to select your first bachelor's degree. So that drop down, you want to make sure you select the degree that you're working towards. If you have not received a bachelor's degree, you don't want to select second bachelor's degree since you haven't received your first bachelor's degree. And you also do not want to select a graduate program since you have not received a bachelor's degree and you will not be a graduate student next year. Generally, you want to select first bachelor's degree, associate's degree, or a certificate program. The next question is going to ask you if you'll have your first bachelor's degree before you begin the 2022-2023 school year. So you can answer that question accordingly. If you're just starting out on college or if you haven't received a bachelor's degree yet, the answer to that question will be no. But let's say you have received a bachelor's degree, then you will select yes. And then it'll say, what will your college grade level be when you begin the 2022-2023 school year? So if you're just starting out, you're going to be a first year freshman. If it's your second year in college, you're going to select second year sophomore, and so on. The last question is going to ask you, are you interested in being considered for work study? Work study is a federal program where you're basically given a job on campus, sometimes off campus, but it's usually on campus, where you work and you're paid wages just like any other job. You get paid either in the form of a check or direct deposit. The only difference between work study and another job is that the work study program is paid by the federal government. So if you do want to be considered for a work study program, go ahead and select yes. If you don't, you can go ahead and select no. And if you're not sure, you can always select don't know. And then you want to hit continue. For selective service, it's going to ask you to select whether you're male or female. If you select male, it's going to ask you if you're registered with the selective service system. So the selective service system is basically the military draft. Every male between the ages of 18 and 26 is legally obligated to register with a selective service system. So it's going to ask you if you're registered or not. And then you hit continue. And just going back real quick to the selective service question, if you're not sure if you're registered, you can always go to the selective service website and confirm your registration status. And if you're not registered and you're between the ages of 18 and 26, you can always register. It doesn't take very long. And then you can come back here and answer the question accordingly. And then you'll hit continue. It's going to ask you for your driver's license if you have one. You want to go ahead and enter the information and hit continue. Then it's going to ask you if you're in foster care or if you were in foster care at any time. Then it's going to ask you for both of your parents' high school completion status. If you're a one-parent household, you only have to provide information for one parent. And if you have a legal guardian, this will apply to your legal guardian. The next one is going to be a couple of other questions. The first question is, have you ever received federal student aid? So if you have received financial aid in the past, you want to go ahead and hit yes. But if you're have never completed a FAFSA, this is your first time, you want to go ahead and select no. It's also going to ask you if you've been convicted of the possession or sale of illegal drugs for an offense that occurred while you were receiving federal student aid. So you want to answer that question accordingly. And beginning this year, regardless of how you answer that second question, you will still maintain your financial aid eligibility. So in the past, if you answered yes to this question, you were automatically disqualified from financial aid. But that is no longer the case for this year. And then you'll hit continue. So that's the end of the first section. The second section is going to ask you two things. So first, it's going to ask you to add your high school that you graduated from. And so what you want to do is you want to enter the information on the search criteria. So you want to select the state of the high school, the city of the high school, and the high school name, and then click on search. It's going to pop up a list of schools that match the search criteria that you entered. So you want to make sure you select the right high school, and then it's going to ask you to confirm your high school, and you'll hit continue if everything looks good. Now it's going to ask you to add the colleges that you're thinking about attending to. So all of the colleges that you add on here, and you can add up to 10, will receive your FAFSA application after you submit it. It does take a little bit of time, but they will all receive your information. So you'll add a college similar to how you search for a high school. You'll select the state, the city, and the school name. And then you want to select the college or university from the list. And now that you've added that school, it'll start to populate a list for you. Now, once you add a college, you also have to select the housing plan. So this is basically how you plan to house yourself once you get to that university or college. So there's three options. You can either select that you're going to live on campus in dormitories provided by the institution, off campus in your own apartment or with roommates, or with parents. So you want to select the option that best applies to your housing plan for each college and university. So you can add up to 10 colleges. So you would just click on add more schools if you're thinking about going to more than, if you're thinking about pursuing or looking into more than one school. I suggest that even if you're not planning on going to college in California, I suggest you still add at least one school from California, because if you don't add a school from California, the state of California for its grant programs will not receive your information. It'll be harder for them to receive it, for you to send the information to them later on if you do not add at least one school from California. So you want to make sure, even if you're not thinking about going to a school in California, you can go ahead and just add at least one school that's located in California, because if you end up changing your mind, your information will be available for the state grant programs, and you'll be considered for state grants such as the Cal Grant program. After you've added all the schools that you're thinking about attending, you want to go ahead and continue. And that's the end of the second section. So now it'll be the third section, which is dependency status. it's going to ask you questions about yourself, and you want to just answer them accordingly. So the first question is, what is your marital status as of today? After you select the appropriate response, you hit continue. It's going to ask you two more questions if you have dependent children. So if you have any children, or if you're planning on having any children during the school year, you want to go ahead and select yes. If you don't have any children, you're not planning on having any children during the next school year, you want to go ahead and select no. It's also going to ask you if you have other dependents. So this is individuals who are not your children, but who you support more than 50%. Such as there's some students who may live on their own and who provide support for their siblings or their spouse, excuse me, not the spouse, or a niece or a nephew. So if you have other dependents who are not your children or your spouse, but who you provide support to, you want to go ahead and hit yes. If you don't have other dependents, go ahead and select no, and then go ahead and hit continue. It's going to ask you some additional dependency questions. So you just want to go through this list and select any of these boxes if any of these circumstances apply to you. So it's going to ask you if you're on active duty with the U.S. Armed Forces, if you're a veteran, if at any time you were in foster care, or you were a dependent or ward of the court, if you're an emancipated minor, or if someone other than your parent or step-parent has legal guardianship of you. And if none of them apply, you can also select none of the above and then hit continue. It's also going to ask you if on or after July 1st, this says 2020, but your 2023 FAFSA application will say 2021. It's going to ask you if you were homeless or if you were self-supporting or at risk of being homeless. So if after July 1st, 2021, you were homeless or self-supporting or at risk of being homeless, you want to go ahead and select yes. Now, homeless in this case does not mean that you live on the streets. It simply means that you do not have stable housing. So if you're couch surfing, if you're living with relatives, if you're living with friends, and your housing situation is unstable, that is considered homeless for financial aid purposes. So answer that question accordingly and then hit continue. Now, once you answer those questions, it's going to tell you whether or not you have to provide information about your parents. So if you're a dependent student, you're going to have to provide information about your parents. So it'll ask you whether you will provide information about your parents or whether you're unable to provide information about your parents. So you should provide information about your parents if you can communicate with them, even if you live on your own. However, if you really cannot contact your parents, or contacting them will put you physically at harm, you want to make sure and select that second option. But if you can't communicate with your parents, even if it's hard to do so, you will have to provide information about your parents. If you select that second option, what will happen is your application will be flagged for verification, and then the institution will contact you to verify some information. If you're an independent student, you won't have to provide information about your parents. So you want to go ahead and continue. So the rest of the application is assuming that you're a dependent student. If you're an independent student, you're going to be able to skip a lot of the sections where it asks for parent information. So that's the end of section 3. When you get to section 4, it's primarily information about your parents. So it's going to ask you some pretty straightforward questions. When your parents got married and what's their marital status. It's also going to ask you for information about your parents. And if you're a one-parent household, you only have to provide information for one parent. It's going to ask for your parents' social security number, last name, first initial, date of birth, and email address. It's going to ask information for the other parent as well, if it applies. It's going to ask for their state of legal residence. It's going to ask them if they lived in California for at least 5 years. It's also going to ask them how many dependent children your parents have. So this is how many children they have that they provide support for. So if you have any other siblings, this is where you would enter other siblings. It's also going to ask how many other dependents do your parents have. So this is individuals who aren't your parents' children, but who live with your parents, who receive more than half of their support from your parents, and who will continue to receive more than half of their support from your parents between July 1st, 2022 and June 30th, 2023. So during the next school year. So let's say your grandpa and let's say your uncle lives with you, you would put them under dependents if your parents provide more than half of their support. And after you enter that information, it's going to calculate your household size, which consists of you, your parents, dependent children, such as your siblings, and other dependents of your parents. And then it's going to ask you, out of all those individuals, not including your parents, how many are going to be in college next year? So you want to enter that number where it asks for it. And again, that's not include your parents. So let's say, for example, you're going to college, you have a sister that's going to college, and you have an uncle who's staying with you who will also be going to college, then that'll be 3 in college. And again, this does not include your parents. So even if your parents are going to college next year, you will not include them in this number. Next, it's going to ask you about your parents' tax filing status. So you want to answer those 3 questions accordingly. And based on your responses, you may be able to use the IRS Data Retrieval Tool to transfer your parents' tax information to the FAFSA application, which makes your application much easier. And it also ensures more accurate information. So if you do want to use the IRS Retrieval Tool, you will click on Proceed to the IRS. If you skip it, you will be able to provide the information manually. And if you do use that IRS Data Retrieval Tool, you'll just proceed to the IRS, and you will be taken to the login page for the IRS Data Retrieval Tool. And again, it'll ask for your parent to provide their FSA ID credentials to be able to log in for that tool. If your parent does not have an FSA ID when they get to this point, they can click on the link to create one, and they can always come back to the application. And just as a heads up too, on the application towards the top, you should be able to see a Save an Applications link. So if at any point you need to pause your application, you can save your application, log off, and when you log back on, you should be able to pick up where you left off. And here's what the IRS Data Retrieval Tool looks like. So you will just enter information about your parents, and then it will ask you to transfer the information to the FAFSA, and you'll hit Transfer Now. And after you transfer the information from the IRS to the FAFSA, it's still going to ask you for some questions about your parents' financials. So you want to get your parents' 2020 tax return for the 2022-2023 FAFSA application. And so you want to read the questions depending on the application that you're submitting, and it's going to ask you for a specific tax year. So in this case, it's asking for 2020 tax information. So you will go to the 2020 tax forms when your parents file their taxes. And then it's going to ask you questions about gross income and other financial questions. It's also going to give you a hint of where you can find it on the tax form. So you just want to answer these questions accordingly and refer to their tax return documents to gather the information and input it into the cell. When you get to this part, if your parents file their taxes jointly, it's going to ask how much your first parent earned and how much your second parent earned. Now, on the tax return form, it doesn't separate the income. So what you can do is, if both of your parents worked, take all their W-2s, which are usually stapled to the end of the tax return, divide them up, and then just add up the totals for each parent, and then enter them on these cells, and then hit Continue. And then again, you just want to go through these questions, referring to the tax document, and answer these questions accordingly. I just want to go back to this question. A lot of students get stuck on this question. It says, enter the amount of your parents' income tax for 2020. And it says, this is a total amount of IRS form 1040, line 22, minus Schedule 2, line 2. So a lot of students find the income tax in line 22 on form 1040, but they cannot find the information from Schedule 2. If your parents' tax information does not include a form that says Schedule 2 on the top, that means they did not file a Schedule 2, and all you have to do is include the information from line 22 on form 1040. However, if your parent does have a Schedule 2 in their tax documents, then you will subtract the amount from line 2 of Schedule 2 from the amount line 22 on Form 1040. And after you get done completing these questions about your parents' income information, it's also going to ask you for tax information about yourself. So you want to answer these 3 questions accordingly. It's going to ask you if you've completed your IRS income tax or another tax return for the year. If you were not required, you did not, it's going to let you skip the next section. But if you did complete a tax return, it's going to ask you what income tax return did you file and what status did you file in. And so if you did file tax return, you're not going to be able to skip this section. It's going to be the same process as your parents. It's going to ask you if you want to transfer your data using the IRS Data Retrieval Tool. And then after that, after you transfer your data or after you enter your data manually, it's going to ask you for some more questions about your income and your assets. And again, you want to use your tax return documents to complete this section. And after you get done entering that information, the last question it's going to ask you is, are you a paid preparer? So if you completed this application as a student, the answer to this question will be no. This is if you paid someone to help prepare your FAFSA, then they would select yes as a paid preparer. But since you're the student completing your FAFSA application, you will select no. And after you hit continue for that question, you will then be taken to a summary of your FAFSA application. Just want to make sure to review the information for accuracy. And if everything looks good, you can print the page, or you can hit continue, or both. And once you hit continue, it's going to ask you to agree to the terms, and then you're going to be able to click on sign and submit your FAFSA form. And now that you've signed your FAFSA, your parent still needs to sign it. So again, your parent can click on provide parent signature. Only one parent has to do this. It's going to ask you for which parent is providing the signature. If both of your parents have the same last name, you want to look at the date of birth and the social security number to select the right parent. They're going to agree to the terms and hit continue. And they're going to enter their FSA ID. And when they enter the FSA ID, they can click sign this FAFSA form. If they do not have an FSA ID and they cannot create one, either because they don't have a social security number or because they do not want to create an FSA ID, they can click on other options to sign and submit, and that'll allow them to print a signature page, which can then be mailed to the FSA program. But if your parent provides an FSA ID, signs a FAFSA form using that ID, you'll get the confirmation page. It'll say congratulations and your name. It'll give you a basic overview of the colleges that you listed. And about a week or two after you submit your FAFSA application, when you go back to your FAFSA account, it should say processed successfully. And from this point, you can always come back to your FAFSA application to make corrections or remove and add more schools. And you can also view your student aid report as well. The student aid report has information about eligibility, so it'll tell you what you might be eligible for when you get to your college or university. That's pretty much it for the FAFSA application. I'm also going to cover real quick the California DREAM Act application. Again, the California DREAM Act application is for students that are undocumented or AB 540 students. To get to the California DREAM Act application, you'll go to www.dream.csac.ca.gov. You can also create a web grants account as well. This is for state programs. And to do that, you'll go to mygrantinfo.csac.ca.gov. Here's some 10 common FAFSA mistakes as well. Number one is not filling out the FAFSA as soon as it is available. Again, the sooner you submit the FAFSA, the better, just because some financial aid programs are first come, first serve. And you also want to make sure that the college and university you're attending has as much time as possible to process your information. Also, not filing the FAFSA by the deadline. So some financial aid programs, such as the Cal Grant, has a March 2nd deadline. So the application that just opened up on October 1st, The priority deadline is March 2nd. So when in doubt, just make sure you complete your FAFSA application by March 2nd. Not getting an FSA ID before filling out the FAFSA. So again, you need an FSA ID to log into the FAFSA and sign it. Also not using your FSA ID to start the FAFSA. So you want to make sure the FSA ID you use pertains to you and it is your FSA ID. Not using the IRS Data Retrieval Tool. So again, if you use the tool, the information on the FAFSA will be more accurate. If you don't use a tool and the information is inaccurate, you will be asked to verify your tax information when you get to your college or university. Number 6 is not reading definitions carefully. So you just want to make sure you read through the FAFSA questions carefully to make sure you're inputting an appropriate response. And again, inputting incorrect information. So if it asks you for a certain piece of information and you provide something else, that's going to flag your application for verification. Not reporting required information. So again, if you choose to not report certain information, you might be selected for verification, and which might also set back the processing of your FAFSA application and delay it. Number 9 is listing only one college on your FAFSA. Again, you're allowed to put up to 10 colleges. So just go ahead and put every college that you think you might be open to attending. And again, you want to add at least one college from California. And number 10 is not assigning the FAFSA. So the FAFSA is not submitted until you sign it and at least one parent signs it if a parent signature is required. So if you have any questions, you can reach out to us, the financial aid department at Delta College. We have a few ways to get a hold of us. One of the fastest way to get a hold of us is using the live chat feature, which is accessible through the Delta College website. That's www.deltacollege.edu. And that live chat feature actually lets you chat with an agent between the hours of 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday. And so if you need some quick help, if you have a quick question, live chat is a perfect resource for that. However, if you have a more specific question pertaining to your file, you can also schedule a virtual appointment with us, or you can also schedule an appointment to receive one-on-one assistance with your FAFSA or California Dream Act application. And I can actually jump onto a web browser real quick and show you how to access both of these features. So if you open up a web browser, you go to www.deltacollege.edu. And so as soon as you log on, that live chat bubble is going to pop up and you can go to chat now. However, if you want to schedule a virtual appointment with us, you can go to services, financial aid and scholarships. Here's our homepage to our department. You can scroll down and here are the links to schedule a virtual appointment. Again, if you have specific questions regarding your student file, you can hit this first link here. Or if you need one-on-one assistance with the FAFSA or California Dream Act, you can click on this link. And so if you click on the link, it'll take you to our calendar where you can select a time to meet with us. Going back to the presentation, a few other ways to get a hold of us. Let me go back to our slide. Oh, let me go all the way through the presentation. So again, this is a lot of information. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. So here we go. Other ways to get a hold of us, there's our Delta College homepage. You can also call us by phone at 209-954-5115. It is a voicemail-based system. So if you leave a voicemail, we do check our voicemails daily, and we do respond typically within 1 to 2 business days. You can also email us at finaid@deltacollege.edu, and we typically respond within 1 to 2 business days as well. You may also be able to reach us in person. However, given the current circumstances surrounding the COVID-19 pandemic, I do suggest that you live chat with us to see if live help in person is available on that day. I'm hesitant to put some information here about in person when that could change. So please do reach out to us on live chat if you prefer to come in person. and we can let you know if we're available for that service. So that is it for today. Please feel free to reach out if you have any questions. I hope you gained some insight in the FAFSA application. And again, please reach out if you need any assistance. Thank you.